Happy Sunday. Yes, we can have a Sunday morning story today, even in preparation for places to go today. So, I don't pre-read. What do we have today? Going someplace special. Oh, I'm going someplace special. I'm sure you are too. This is by Patricia McKissack, and Jerry Pinkney is the illustrator. You are somebody, a human being, no better, no more than anybody else in this world. When Trisha Ann's grandmother allows her to go to quote unquote someplace special, alone for the first time, she bursts with excitement, but it starts to feel less and less exciting along the way as she experiences the segregation of her 1950s southern town. She has to sit in the back of the bus, then find cruel signs that read for whites only. When Trisha Ann remembers her grandmother's words, "You are somebody, a human being, no better, no worse than anybody else in the world," she presses forward and finds her someplace special. The public library, where everyone is welcome. I'm so happy that my public library down the street is now open on Sundays, and so many other libraries. Okay, going somewhere special. You could tell that it would be somewhere prestigious based on the architectural detail of the columns here. Yep, a historic building. Beautiful. Is that wash? Look at this. Oh, the watercolor, I believe. Look at this. Exquisite. Very good, Jerry Pinkney. Oh my goodness, this might be part one, part two. Let's see, because I gotta get ready for church. Trisha Ann was about to burst with excitement. Crossing her fingers and closing her eyes, she blurted out her question. "Mama Frances, may I go to someplace special by myself today? Pretty please. I know where to get off the bus and what streets to take and all." Although it had another name, Trisha Ann always called it some place special because it was her favorite spot in the world. Yeah, I used to like the Cultural Center, which was the previous headquarters of the Chicago Public Library down in Washington, between Washington and Randolph, between Michigan and Wabash. Yes, don't get me started. "Please, may I go, pretty please, with marshmallows on top? I don't know if I'm ready to turn you loose in the world," her grandmother, Mama Frances, answered, trying to sash Trisha Ann's dress. "Going off alone is a mighty big step." "I'm ready," the girl said, taking a giant leap across the floor. "See what a big step I can make?" Mama Frances chuckled, all the time studying her granddaughter's face. "I trust you'll be particular and remember everything I've told you." I will. Real confident like, she said. Suddenly, her smile grew into a full grin. "So you're saying I can go?" "I reckon, but you best hurry on, for I changed my mind." Pulling her pocketbook up on her shoulder, Trisha Ann blew her grandmother a thank you kiss. Then she rushed out the door and down the sidewalk. Look at the beautiful flowers. Oh, that reminds me of my grandmother's garden, too. And no matter what, Mama Frances called after her, "Hold your head up high. High enough to see who you are. Little young lady, little man." Don't get me started in a Black Gold song. Hold your head up high. "And act like you belong to somebody." Yes, you do belong to somebody special, Trisha Ann. At the corner, a green and white bus came to a jerky stop and hissed. When the doors folded back, Trisha Ann bounded up the steps and dropped in the fare, same as when Mama Frances was with her. The girl squared those shoulders, girl, walked to the back and took a seat behind the Jim Crow sign that said colored section. And remember, before Rosa Parks, there was the teenager who refused to give up her seat, but she was a 15-year-old, and I think she was a teenage mom. And then I think there was another woman. So there were a couple of people who took stands and refused to give up their seat before Rosa Parks, but we salute all of them. Trisha Ann had been, it's like Claudette Colvin. Trisha Ann had seen such signs all her life. She recalled the first time she and Mama Frances had taken this bus ride, and her grandmother had told her, those signs can tell us where to sit, but they can't tell us what to think. I know that's right. That's that grandmother wit and wisdom. I'm going to think about someplace special, Trisha Ann said to herself, and turned to look out the window. Stop by, the bus began to fill. At the farmer's market, we have one today, people crowded on, carrying bags of fruit and vegetables. Mrs. Granel, Mama Frances' friend from Sewing Club, climbed on board. As she inched her way toward the back, Trisha Ann noticed that there were no seats left behind the Jim Crow sign. So she stood up and gave Mrs. Granel hers. Yes. Respect your elders. It's not fair, she said, glaring at the empty seats up front. No, but that's the way it is, honey, said Mrs. Granel. I don't understand why, she began. But by now, the bus had reached Trisha Ann's stop in front of Capitol Square in the heart of downtown. The doors swung open, and she hurried off. Carry yourself proud, sweetheart, Mrs. Granel called out the window as the bus pulled away. That's right. Wherever you're going today, carry yourself proud. Hold that head up high. I know sometimes you feel like this figure in the back, she's at the piano and she's stooped over, but and maybe you feel like that indoors, but when you go outdoors, whoo, that's right. I'm telling you. Holding her hat, Trisha Ann leaned back as far as she could to the Peace Fountain's magnificent water show. It made her dizzy to watch the sprays that shot high into the air. But she liked the feeling and turned round and round with her arms outstretched. Then giggling, she staggered on wobbly legs to a nearby bench. Oh, I love doing stuff like this. Now you're talking about the library, then now you're talking about one of my favorite architectural elements, a fountain. Oh my goodness. This is my type of book. Instantly, Trisha Ann leaped to her feet. On the bench was a sign that said, for whites only. Her face fell as she wished for Mama Frances' strong hand to hold. Silly signs, she muttered as she strutted away on sober legs. That's right, silly signs. Don't you mind that. Just go on and enjoy your day. At the edge of the square, she greeted Jimmy Lee, a street vendor. What's got your face all clouded up like a stormy day? He asked, handing Trisha Ann a free pretzel. Jim Crow makes me so mad. My grandfather was a stonemason on Peace Fountain. He was one of the ones who created that beautiful fountain. Why can't I sit down and enjoy it? Jimmy Lee pointed to a sign in Monroe's restaurant window. You see that? He said, my brother cooks all the food they serve. But do you think we can sit at one of their tables and have a BLT and a cup of coffee together? Then with a chuckle, he whispered, not that I'd want to eat anything Jesse cooks. That man can't even now scald water. The light changed and Trisha Ann carefully started across the street. Don't let those signs steal your happiness, Jimmy Lee called after her. That reminds me of the lunch counter demonstrations at Woolworth with those North Carolina A&T students, those 4 or 5 young men. It started out with those group of young men, and they would bring their homework, they would bring their books, and they would plant them on the counters, but they were refused food. But day and night, they would keep on coming back to those counters, and they would sit there, and they would have dignity, and they would have their head up high, and they would continue to study, and they did that day after day, week after week, month after month. And guess what? Other college students joined them. Females from all over, males from all over, studious, genius. And they were determined. They were like, you know what? Yeah, we could go without food, but we're going to retain our right and our dignity. Oh, that was beautiful. I tell you. And so many other boycotts and lunch sit-ins occurred during that time. Trisha Ann pulled her shoulders back and fixed her thoughts on being inside that warm and welcoming place where there were no signs. Hurrying up 10th Avenue, she passed the filling station and stopped to buy a pop to wash down Jimmy Lee's pretzel. At the second light, the Southland Hotel rose up in front of her. As spectacular as a palace, Mr. John Willis, the hotel's doorman, saw her. I believe an angel done slipped away from heaven, he said, smiling. Isn't that sweet? Trisha Ann managed to smile back. Mr. John Willis always said the nicest things. No, sir, it's just me. Your mouth is smiling, but your eyes aren't. Ooh. You know they can tell when something's the matter. Child, listen to them. Just then, a long white car with 2 police escorts pulled up in front of the hotel. A man with black shiny hair and shy eyes stepped out. Suddenly, people were everywhere, screaming and begging for his autograph. Trisha Ann got caught in the crowd and swept inside. So often she wondered what it would feel like to walk on the royal red carpet that covered the double winding staircase, or to stand in the light of the chandelier that looked like a million diamonds strung together. Now there she was, smack in the middle of the Southlands Hotel grand lobby. Doesn't this lobby remind you of those fancy schmancy historic hotels like the Palmer House in Chicago, Hilton, and so many other ones, 1800s. The Blackstone Hotel. Somebody pointed at her. What is she doing in here? It seemed as if the whole world had stopped talking, stopped moving, and was staring at her. The manager pushed his way to the front of the crowd. That's what makes you think you can come inside. No colored people are allowed. And he shooed the girl away with his arms. Trisha Ann backed out, shaking her head. I didn't mean, she said, trying hard not to cry. Haven't you been in situations where people have tried to humiliate you and were very mean to you? That's okay. That's okay. Just shake it off and keep your head up high. Maybe later on, let your emotions out. But hurrying past Mr. John Willis, Trisha Ann ran straight into the Mission Church. Yes, ruins, where Mama Frances often stopped to rest. There in the protection of the walled garden, the girl let the tears come. That's right. Go to a protected place and let it out. Get into someplace special isn't worth it, she sobbed. I'm going home. My flowers have been watered already, came a voice above her. It was Bloomin' Mary, an elderly woman who took care of the garden with neither permission nor pay. Everybody said she was addled, but Mama Frances didn't agree. Bloomin' Mary is a kind and gentle soul. She told Trisha Ann. You lost, child? The woman asked. Trying to steady her voice, Trisha Ann answered, No, ma'am. I just wish my grandmother was here to help me to get to someplace special. You can't get there by yourself. It's too hard. I need my grandmother. Bloomin' Mary nodded and thought on the matter. Then she said, I believe your granny is here, just as my granny is here with me, even as I speak. Listen close. Tell me what you hear. You still have the lessons of loved ones in your heart. All Trisha Ann heard was the distant buzz of a bumblebee. What was Bloomin' Mary talking about? But as she listened closer, she began to hear her grandmother's steady voice. You are somebody, a human being, no better, no worse than anybody else in the world. Getting someplace special is not an easy route, but don't study on quitting. Just keep walking straight ahead and you'll make it. I love it. Don't study on quitting. Don't fix your thoughts on failure and negativity. Woo! Don't study on quitting. I love that. I'm going to use that. Just keep on walking. Trisha Ann recalled those words from many conversations they had in this quiet place. They were so comforting. She didn't feel alone anymore. She wiped her eyes and straightened her hat. You were right, ma'am, the girl told Bloomin' Mary. Mama Frances is here, and she wouldn't want me to turn back. So you aren't lost after all, said Bloomin' Mary, giving Trisha Ann a bright orange zinnia. Zinnia, beautiful flower, I'll say. No, ma'am, I'm not. And saying goodbye, she headed real determined like on her way. I hope you feel some determination to do some great things at the beginning of this week. 2 blocks later, Trisha Ann came to Grand Music Palace, where a group had gathered for the matinee performance. As the girl approached, a little boy spoke to her. "Howdy, I'm Hickey, and I'm 6 years old today. You coming in?" Before Trisha Ann could answer, an older girl grabbed his hand. "Hush, boy," she said through clenched teeth. "Colored people can't come in the front door. They got to go round back and sit up in the buzzard's roost. Don't you know nothing?" his sister whispered harshly. Hickey looked at Trisha Ann with wide, wondering eyes. "Are you going to sit up there in the last 3 rows of the balcony? Why, I wouldn't sit up there even if watermelons bloomed in January." "Besides, I'm going to someplace very, very special," she answered, and then Trisha Ann skipped away. "I want to go where she's going," she heard Hickey said as his sister pulled him through the door. "That's right. If watermelons bloomed in January, you still don't want to reduce yourself in certain situations. Look at this." At the corner, Trisha Ann saw a building rising above all that surrounded it. Looked proud in the summer sun. It was much more than bricks and stone. It was an idea. Mama Frances called it a doorway to freedom. When she looked at it, she didn't feel angry or hurt or embarrassed. At last, she whispered, "I've made it to someplace special." What a beautiful library. This reminds me of a beautiful library in Milwaukee. Oh my goodness. The relics is just so pretty as far as the historical nature. Before bounding up the steps and through the front door, Trisha Ann stopped to look up at the message chiseled in stone across the front facing. "Public library. All are welcome." Oh, do we have time for the author's note? This is my story. Although the setting has been fictional, the events are taken from my own childhood growing up in Nashville, Tennessee. I lived in Nashville for a few months. Nashville, like most southern cities in the 1950s, was separated. The doors of hotels, restaurants, churches, and amusement parks were posted with Jim Crow segregation signs that barred African Americans, who also had to endure the further indignities of riding in the backs of buses, attending separate schools, sitting in the last rows of the balcony. I sat on the last row of the balcony recently at the opera. I was like, "Oh no, I won't." At the top, I said, "Oh no." I changed that seat. And drinking from separate water fountains. But in the late 1950s, Nashville's Public Library Board of Directors quietly voted to integrate all their facilities. The downtown branch was one of the few places where there were no Jim Crow signs and blacks were treated with some respect. Most African American parents waited until their children were mature enough to cope with segregation before allowing them to venture outside their communities alone. I was almost 12 then. I'm looking at the time. And my parents trusted me to make the trek to the library by myself. But like Trisha Ann, I had been fortified with enough love, respect, and pride to overcome any situation I encountered. Along the way, I had to face all kinds of racial bigotry and discrimination. But for me, the library was always filled with a specialness that made the effort worthwhile. Since I felt welcome there, I checked out books more often. And the more I read, the better I understood why my grandmother believed the library was someplace more exciting, more interesting, and more informative than hotels, movies, restaurants, and amusement parks. She, like Andrew Carnegie, whose great wealth helped to build the library, knew that reading is the doorway to freedom. Miss Patricia McKissack, thank you for this wonderful book. And I thought that was her husband, Jerry Pinkney. I knew that. He's the illustrator of Coretta Scott King Award winner 4 times. And Mr. Pinkney lives... Wait a minute. But then it says Mr. Pinkney lives in Croton, Hudson, New York with his wife, author Gloria Jean. Well, you know what? If they're not married, they're good friends. They're just a great team, and this was a wonderful story. And oh yeah, she wrote with her husband Frederick. So Patricia's husband is Fred, and Jerry Pinkney's wife is Gloria Jean. Doesn't matter. They are in partnership. They're making great books. I hope you find someplace special today. It might not be the library. I'm on my way to someplace special, and I hope you hold your head up high. I know I am, and walk with dignity and enjoy freedom.